enjoying the first part of the year. We're fixing to get some colder weather here. It's already cold here for us in Texas, but we're fixing to get some colder weather next week. I know people laugh at us when we get cold weather, but oh yeah, Richana said it's snowing here in Michigan. Yeah, we would be shut down. So just let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. I guess I am sharing it. Hold on one second. Let's see. I just checked all of this earlier and it was all working great, and now it's not going to come up correctly. So here we go. Okay, so I can see my screen. So we're talking about a topic today that's actually pretty near and dear to my heart, for the simple fact that I've lived with it. And recently, in more recent years, I have had residents come to me with a diagnosis, and we have had to go through some accommodations. And so I feel like as our world becomes more aware, let me know, are you getting my full screen or my note screen?
Not yet. Still,
No,
it started sharing.
half and half.
Now it is full.
There it is.
There it is. Okay, is that the full screen or note screen?
Full screen.
Oh,
Okay, it's telling me Zoom quit unexpectedly. If y'all lose me, let me know. Aria's right across the hall from me. Let's see. All right, Aria, give me a thumbs up if you can see me. Everything's
You're good,
good?
baby. Keep
Okay.
going. Yeah.
Okay. So good morning. So I'm Kimberly Warfield. Some of you have heard me talk before, but for if you haven't, or I'll just reintroduce myself. So I'm currently the Career Development and Residency Counselor at Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm the year 1 and 2 counselor. Previous to this, I spent 20 plus years in residency management, most recently with the family medicine program at HCA Fort Worth. I fell into this career. I don't know that anybody has gone into this career path knowingly yet. But so I started in 1999, and I've told my story in previous talks, but just to say that I love the world of residency management. I love residents. It's such a unique world. No one really knows how to be here in the US unless you're in this world or you're a physician, right? So, but just that's a little bit about myself. So over 2.5 decades of experience. Aria actually gave me that label recently in the past few months, when we were talking about speaker sheets and stuff, and I was like, wow, 2.5 decades. I
I'm
really don't want to talk about.
sorry. I did it
No,
out of
no,
love. Not
it's absolutely perfect. But I was like, oh, it just kind of hits you differently when it's said that way. And she's not wrong. So time goes by.
she froze.
Okay, am I here? It looks like Aria and I both might have lost connection, and Nicole. Is Nicole still here? This may be a.
You're back on.
I'm in here. I just had
Okay.
to block my screen for a second.
Oh, okay, because I totally went out. So thank you guys. Sorry, I apologize for that. Can you see my screen, or should I reshare? Let me share again. Hold
Reshare
on.
it again.
Okay. I apologize for that, guys. I know earlier in the week there was just a nationwide Zoom issue, so I hope that doesn't happen all day. Aria, have you started recording yet?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
I never stopped recording. So
oh, okay, good. All right, so I'm not going to reintroduce myself, but just to say, we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to talk about neurodivergence and residency management. I'm going to do a little bit of background on, I'm actually going to specifically talk about ADHD, but I will show you a slide of all the diagnoses that fall in this category, and there are more. So let's get started. So my objectives for today, let me go over to this screen. My objectives for today are to define neurodivergence. It's a relatively new term, and the special neurological variations of that. Discuss strategies to contribute to the success of staff, residents, and programs. I want to raise awareness about the various neurodivergent conditions and their unique strengths and challenges, and then foster a culture that values and embraces diversity in all of its forms. So a little bit about me. I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult after one of my children was diagnosed. As her diagnosis came to fruition and I learned the different nuances, I was like, that's me, right? And so I went and got testing. And I see very clearly where I struggled with the symptoms as a child. I was very good at masking it. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was not on anybody's radar. So one of my children has ADHD, another one has ADHD and autism. I have my son is actually a physician, and we had a conversation this morning, and we were talking about the talk I was going to do, and he said, "Well," he said, "the 2 cups of coffee and the energy drink sitting beside me at 7 a.m. might lead me to that diagnosis as well." So, just kind of one of those, learn more about things that follow in your family line. So, let me of neurodivergence refers to the diversity of neurological conditions and differences in cognitive functioning among individuals. It recognizes the neurological variations, such as those associated with different cognitive, developmental, and behavioral patterns, are natural and contribute to the richness of the human experience. So, right, none of us are the same. We're all different. This concept challenges the idea that there is a standard or normal neurological profile. There's a quote that Whoopi Goldberg says, and she says, "Normal is the only thing normal is the cycle on your washing machine." And I love that. I think that's true. So as a society, we often view differences as something to be feared or avoided. However, the concept of neurodiversity challenges this perspective by celebrating the unique ways our brains work. We first need to understand what we mean by neurodiversity. Essentially, neurodiversity is the idea that there's no one normal way for our brains to function. Instead, each individual
I think it just dropped Kimberly.
I'm back. I'm so
Okay.
sorry. I don't know what you heard last. Let me share my screen again.
You started talking about the after the same from Whoopi Goldberg about the washing cycle.
Is that the last thing you heard? Because I read I said a whole paragraph that I'm so sorry, guys. I just told Nicole, we all work together, Nicole, Ari, and I just told Nicole my computer was glitchy. So this is proof. So I talked to you about, I said the quote from Whoopi Goldberg, which is one of my favorites. But let's go ahead and start again. And I'm sorry. But so as a society, we often view differences as something to be feared and avoided. However, the concept of neurodiversity challenges this perspective by celebrating the unique ways our brains work. We all look differently. We have different hair. We have different textures. Well, of course, our brains work differently. That just makes sense to me. We first need to understand what we mean by neurodiversity. Essentially, neurodiversity is the idea that there's no one normal way for our brains to function. Instead, each individual has a unique neurological makeup, which can manifest in various ways. The phrase neurodiversity came from a lady named Judy Singer, who's an autism rights activist, and Harvey Bloom, a New York journalist. It's now widely accepted by the autism rights and advocacy movement. Neurodiversity has evolved to include a broad range of neurological and developmental conditions, which I'll show you in just a moment. These days, it's regularly used as a broad term to encompass a range of conditions, which include ADHD and dyslexia. However, it's important to note that not all neurodivergent individuals have a formal diagnosis, which I'll talk about as well. Rather, neurodiversity encompasses the entire spectrum of the human brain variation. So here is a list of a few of the diagnoses, not all, that fall within the neurodiversity umbrella. The ones I'll be talking about specifically today are the one I'll be talking about. I'll reference to autism a bit, but I'll specifically be targeting ADHD. But we have dyslexia, Tourette's syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder, specific learning disabilities, a social communication disorder, and giftedness. Understanding and embracing neurodiversity involves appreciating the unique strengths and perspectives that individuals with the diagnoses bring to society. It emphasizes creating inclusive environments that accommodate different ways of thinking and processing information. fostering a more accepting and supportive society. I recently completed a Canvas course for our first year students where I incorporated multiple different learning tools. It's very visually appealing graphics. There's lots of clickable interactions, videos, hyperlinks for exploration, the straightforward reading to entice all types of learners. So as I grew up, we had a teacher standing in front of the classroom. She delivered some information. We might read a chapter. You might do some questions at the end. There was some interaction, but in general, growing up, it was a teacher standing in front of us and chalkboards and, and we might get lucky and get transparencies back then and have somebody do something on transparencies. And then we got super excited when we got a movie. So as our cultures have evolved, we've realized that not everyone learns the same way, which I'm greatly appreciative of. So let me switch here. And so, sorry guys, I'm working off two screens. So I loved this quote and I wanted to share it with you guys. Sir Anthony Hopkins, he says, as a boy, I wasn't very bright. I didn't even know the time of day I was in school. I think I had dyslexia or some learning disability. I certainly didn't fit in anywhere. The years passed and a feeling of failure was always with me until by accident, I came across this career and look what's happened. Of course, I don't regret anything because in the long run, look what I've accomplished. So I felt this way very much growing up. While I made good grades, a lot of subjects that were presented to me, I had a hard time grasping some context or concepts until I could figure it out myself. A lot of times I would look at what other kids did and figured out how they did things, especially with math. And then it hit me out when I watched them do it, then I could repeat those processes till I got it. But the teacher teaching in front of the class did not click with me as well. Or it was presented by a different teacher a different way. I can't tell you the times I was kept in at recess because I didn't get something done. And then another teacher would come in and teach me differently and I would catch it. I would understand what they were trying to tell me. So I came into residency management career by chance. And then constantly changing pace and environment became my career. And most days I loved it. That's with anything, right? The ever-changing environment kept me engaged and rarely bored. I have experienced ADHD paralysis when you're presented with big projects, say inspections, the master schedule creation every year, knowing it was coming and you have it on your calendar like months ahead of time. I really struggled through pushing past, even in my own head, like this has to be done. I might do a little bit and then like walk away from it. And that's kind of where I struggle with big projects. They get done. And I'm real good at coming in at the last minute and finishing everything, but it causes me a lot of anxiety and stress. So I still struggle with these symptoms, as I've said. I just have better tools now to work through them, and I recognize them earlier than I ever have in my life. I actually recognize them. I recognize that there's a problem and I need to work through it. So I want to talk about other famous neurodivergent or ADHD individuals in the world. So Thomas Edison, so he, of course, did not have any kind of formal diagnosis, but many people that have gone back and researched his how he did things and how he went through his processes have informally diagnosed him. So they attribute his creativity to ADHD. Michael Jordan, he said he channeled his ADHD through sports. John F. Kennedy, he was able to participate in World War II, served in the Navy, later winning the Victory Medal and the Purple Heart. And Will Smith, he talks openly about the medication he takes and being the fun one who had trouble paying attention. So ADHD is more prevalent in men than females, 4 to 6. Saying that, we feel like it's more prevalent because it's underdiagnosed in females because the symptoms manifest differently. So some famous women are Cher. She has been open about her struggle with dyslexia and ADHD. Mel Robbins, famous speaker and motivator. She has been diagnosed with ADHD and crushing anxiety, as she phrases it, and she was diagnosed at 47. And Whoopi Goldberg, which we talked about, ADHD and dyslexia. And she was also labeled lazy and dumb in school, which is a common diagnosis for children that are later diagnosed with ADHD. So I want to talk about how ADHD might manifest. And I'm kind of going through these symptoms and things so we can kind of maybe see some things in some of our see in our maybe just in our general who we work with from day to day, if that is an issue, but just to be more to educate more. So classic symptoms, how it manifests more externally in boys or men. In general, boys, when they're younger, they can't sit still. Let's say they might bother the neighbors or constantly interrupt. They bounce off the walls, talk a mile a minute, and won't let anyone else talk. Now, I struggle very much with talking too fast. I'm mentally slowing myself down right now. But since we're here, but I want to talk about the differences and how it might look like in girls. First, many learning and social differences like ADHD and autism are categorized in how they affect people. So when I talked about, you know, the little boy that bothers the neighbors, a boy with ADHD is disruptive and potentially insensitive to social situations. They're hypersensitive. They might get in your face, and then they have trouble with social boundaries. Boys with HD can't really be ignored, and they won't let you ignore them. Girls, on the other hand, they have more internalized symptoms. Inattentiveness, being withdrawn, low self-esteem, or it can go the other direction with verbal aggression, teasing, and taunting. That's not to say that a bully has ADHD or vice versa, but these are just some symptoms or how it manifests. So while it's an internal struggle in both sexes, it's more internal for girls. And it's not seen as much, or it's not recognized as much. It's recognized more now, but generally when a girl turns 11, 12, 13, many times this starts breaking apart, right? While many of the symptoms I'm going to talk about are typical to teenagers, combinations of these may point to a neurodivergent individual. So your daughter's disorganized. She forgets the simplest task. She starts losing friends. She's angry all the time. She's irritable and stressed. She struggles to complete assignments. She forgets to turn in schoolwork. Her room is a disaster. That was every one of my teenagers. She agonizes over homework. Maybe her grades are slipping. She has a perfectionist mentality, but can't ever reach that perfectionism. Or she doesn't think she can. Her bar is set very high for herself. She loses everything. She's anxious and loses her self-confidence. She says she isn't good at things she once excelled at. She's spacey, ditzy, daydreams, incredibly self-critical, and as I said, a perfectionist. That's how it can manifest and look like in girls more internally versus the outward signs of boys. So I want to talk about some of the common symptoms that look more common in an adult. So common symptoms in adult ADHD, sorry, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. There you go. See, so I just put that out there. Symptoms vary tremendously from person to person, okay, and gender, as stated by the previous slide. These are a few of the most common symptoms in adulthood. ADHD was previously thought to be a childhood disorder. You outgrew it. It's now known that ADHD persists in up to 60% of adults who exhibited signs as a child. So while you see the things that I have here on the slide, I'm going to talk through some of them. So difficulty staying on task in a distracting environment like a busy classroom, a noisy environment. My coworkers know I shut my door a lot. I have earbuds in a lot to have noise to cut out the external distractions. Difficulty with time blindness and time management, or hyperfixation. I hyperfixate on time. I hate being late. I would rather be an hour early to anything. Anxious about being late, or very black and white. You said the meeting was from 2 to 3 today. It's 3:15. Like I've already planned what my next hour was going to look like. So there's a hyperfixation there. And this can cause people with these anxieties or neurodivergencies distress. Difficulty relaxing at home or taking a needed break. In general, you'll recognize people that are always tired, that their mind never rests. And so when you tell me I need to rest, especially if I'm home, there's things I have to do. There's something that's not being done. And in my mind, I don't let myself rest. Issues with disorganization at home or at school. While adults may keep it together at work, that struggle with ADHD, you may walk into their home and it's chaos of piles and messiness. A lot of adults will let their masking down at home. In their homes, while you thrive in a neat and organized environment, that's where we relax and we let it go. And then losing things easily, like your house keys or your phone. I'm constantly mentally going back to where was the last time I put something down. While I have exact spots in my home to put things, I mentally am always like, okay, my keys were on the bar or my keys were in the dish, where they go. Impulsive behaviors like compulsive shopping or overspending. That's more prevalent, especially with our internet culture, where we can scroll at night before we go to bed. We can put these in the cart at Walmart, or we can buy something on Amazon and you get an immediate dopamine hit from that, which ADHDers crave. Feeling like they're often daydreaming or can't pay attention, constant phone scrolling, struggle with chronic procrastination. And then after you feel like somebody's put something off, they seem to superhumanly pull it together and the project is completed in very little time. I'm very good at that. Not proud of it, but it happens. Easily overwhelmed when doing fun things. And this is true for women in particular. And they also may be labeled emotional when really their brain is just overworked and exhausted. And struggles with ADHD and perfectionism, as I talked about before. What a syndrome which is called rejection sensitive dysphoria, where you just become overwhelmed that you've not done something well enough and you're down, or you've hurt someone's feelings, and it just, that's all you can think about, is that you've done something to cause this reaction in someone else. Or what looks like poor emotional regulation and crying easily. And if anybody has any questions or has anything to add, please throw that into the chat. I did not get to say that earlier.
There's a lot of conversation in the chat, and it's some good conversation, Kimberly.
Why
It
don't
is
we,
amazing.
you guys let me know what's going on there, and let's talk about that for a minute. Let's take a second to go through the chat.
We're having coordinators here who have been diagnosed early as after 25 years old to as later as almost 50 years old.
Yes, that's so, I think it's amazing, and that's so, I don't want to say it's more common nowadays, and it's okay to go to the doctor and
Okay. She got frozen again.
Aria, you guys may have to switch offices.
I'll let her know to come in here.
Give us just a second, you guys. So while Kimberly is switching offices and getting back online, I'll go ahead and just kind of read some of the comments that were in here. One thing that I originally said was when Kimberly talked about how the males outweighed the females that had ADHD, that really was odd to me, because women are more prone to go to the doctor than men are. And so to see that and hear that, that was kind of shocking to me. There's Kimberly Brown said she actually interviewed for a book called How to Be Happy Without Being Perfect. So we want to go ahead and make sure that everyone sees that. We have some that say they do their best work at the last minute and working best under pressure, but could that be considered a procrastinator? I'll go ahead and respond to that question. I'm a procrastinator for when it comes down to my workload, but when it has something to do with anybody else, I get everybody else's stuff done first. I am the executive assistant to the senior associate dean. If she needs something, I drop whatever it is to get it done. But when it comes down to my own schoolwork, I work on it at the last minute. So I wouldn't actually say it's a procrastinator. It's just the way that you prefer to do things. Is she back in, Aria?
Yeah, she's sending me the presentation so I can pull it up here. So we're sorry for the technical difficulties.
I think it's nice to have a space to sort of talk about this kind of stuff because there really isn't one where people aren't saying, oh, this means you can't handle it or this means you can't do it, but instead recognizing that there are differences in how the work is done and acknowledging that it in fact does get done.
Absolutely. And please, everyone, while we're in this transition, if you want to unmute yourself and chime in, this is a place to do so.
I was gonna say, so I put my comment in the chat, but it's also just very listening to all these things, you're kind of like, okay, so is this burnout from my job? Is this burnout from being a parent? Is this anxiety? Did I forget to eat? Like there's 10 million things that it could be, and you're never really sure necessarily what the best approach is to managing it. And I'm very fortunate that in my new role in GME, my supervisor wants to do one-on-ones with us, and we were talking about all these different things that have been going on in our office, what we're doing, where we're going, stuff like that. And then on a personal level, I had no idea what my Enneagram type was. I'm like, I know what my Myers-Briggs, my anything else thing, and all of those little test things, they seem silly to some folks, but it's amazing some of the insight that you can glean from those and how it can impact this. I'm learning a lot about ways that weaknesses I feel in that come from my neurodiversity, and how to ameliorate them in my work experience so that everybody gets a slightly better experience from me.
Oh, and it's also good to recognize it, because I think once you know it, you've been diagnosed, you understand it, of course, we read all the things on it, right? Because we're good at researching things and compiling things and then doing nothing with them, except for when it comes to our ADHD. And so, having that like in the forefront, it's like, oh, I'm getting a little overwhelmed. I need to take a break. I need to take a breath. Or I'm getting really loud. I need to bring it down. Or, so we see executive functioning to answer.
And I'm
yeah.
actually sitting here a little flabbergasted and almost sitting here in shock is what it feels like, because I think some of these things that we're discussing became more identifiable, I think, at a later age for me. As a child, I didn't struggle with a lot of these things, and I actually excelled in school and didn't have a problem in the classroom or learning. However, as an adult, I think it started to register with me when she started to talk about the clutter at home, the procrastination at home, and even sometimes in my work, I become very stagnant and sometimes just kind of stuck staring at my screen. And I have a task list and I know what I need to accomplish, but I just get so distracted and it's just like, oh my God, I don't know what I want to do today, or I don't feel like doing this. And I don't know why, because I'm very capable of completing it and getting it done. But if you put me, I just told my one of my coworkers this the other day, if you put me under pressure and under fire and say I have a deadline, I have no problem getting it done. And I'll get it done with I'll get it done with flying colors. No mistakes or anything. And the impulsive shopping is what really stuck out to me. Late at night, I have a tendency to go shop impulsively, and I'll go buy something that I know I had no need for and no business buying, and spend unnecessary money, but it makes me feel good.
Yep.
And when I wake up in the morning, I'm pissed at myself, but then but at night I felt great about it. And so I don't know where those things come from. And recently, I think last year, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And they were telling me that some other things, and I'm like, okay, that kind of matches with what I go through, but it doesn't reflect everything else that I'm telling you guys. And I'm really not understanding where it's coming from. So a lot of this is kind of resonating with me, and I'm just kind of taking it all in, like, okay, they got some stuff wrong, but this is hitting home. So.
Well,
I'm sorry. I just want to jump in here real fast. I think it's important and thank you for pulling all of this together, because,
I think it's important to understand this, whether you've been diagnosed or not, especially for better understanding and to have empathy and to understand, people who are okay, this is what they're dealing with and so forth. Because a lot of this is new to me, but it helps me to better understand, okay, it has nothing to do with me. This is this person's, work style and to just, to build a better working relationship through understanding. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that is the best statement we made here today. And that's actually the whole point that I'm doing this. That's the whole reason I wanted to do this. I will tell you in the last couple of weeks, I've regretted having this idea, which, we have some great ideas. I've been like, but it's really been therapeutic for me. And that's exactly what I would like to come out of it, is people just to realize that maybe that just doesn't work for someone else. And that's okay, as long as they get to the point they need to get to.
And by the way, I'm the one that trained Valerie, and she was very, very accepting of my neurospiciness, and she would. She knows, she has come to understand my way of training and the way and she just lets me roll with it, and we just touch base afterwards. So
Love that. I love that. And I apologize. I'm thankful that I'm on campus today and I'm not remote, because when the computer gave out, I've moved to another office. So I don't want to stop the conversation, but I want to go ahead and get through this so we can have more conversation at the end. Again, I apologize for that. My computer just totally zoomed, would not come back up. But I want to get back to the talk in this executive functioning graphic. I will let you know that all these graphics came from someone else, and they will be, and it's noted at the end. But this one spoke to me so much, especially in regards to ADHD and also our residents. So if you look at this graphic and you see the executive functioning, right? It talks about all the things that our executive functioning part of our brain that it regulates, activation and planning, emotion, self-monitoring, all the things that are the most important thing to be a physician in my mind. So in addition to our, the normal lack of attention and focus symptoms, everything is affected in our executive functioning as someone with ADHD or different neurodivergent diagnosis. The self-control, the time management. And I know we all struggle with the residents who are never on time, who might have our outburst. And a lot of that is also just related to what they're going through as a resident, right? So these types of self-regulation skills depend on working memory and mental flexibility, self-control. But all these brain functions must operate and coordinate with each other. And so that's why we learn, sorry, I'm on a Mac in Aria's office. I'm not used to seeing this, so I'm moving some stuff around. But the diagram shows the importance of the executive function and the difficulties caused when these areas don't work properly. Some of the most common effects on employment or when these things are not working all in sync. Difficulties with initiating, organizing, carrying out our activities, or a loss of get up and go are often mistaken for laziness, or we just don't want to do something, but we're just not able at the time. It's part of the diagnosis. The next thing that is often talked about is affect regulation. And let's see if so what we're talking about when we say affect regulation, we're talking about emotional regulation. We're talking about coping. We're talking about mood regulation. And we're talking about defenses. So affect regulation or emotional regulation is the felt sense of what's happening in your body. Affect exists on a spectrum, right? And what bothers someone may not bother someone else. What doesn't bother someone may take somebody out for the whole day. It's just different. Imagine being a resident or a coordinator. I added that in here because we're hit with things, fires to put out. We have a day planned in front of us, and somebody didn't show up for clinic. Somebody was in a car wreck. You're having to do something. Just multiple things can happen. All these things have happened to me at one time or another. But you have this diagnosis, but then you're struggling with your emotions all day. Maybe your meds have worn off if you're medicated. Maybe you didn't get good sleep last night. That's so important. All these areas are affected. They're affected even in neurotypical people. It affects neurodiverse people much harder. So ADHD and medical residency. So as increasing numbers of medical students are diagnosed with adult ADHD or they're carrying it through from childhood, residency programs are facing an imperative task to handle these accommodation requests effectively. If you get the accommodation request, many people don't want to divulge their diagnosis. Medical residents occupy unique roles as learners and employees. So there's two things we have to think about. And defining the clear process with residents and programs can be challenging. There's very little literature regarding guidelines for accommodation, specifically with resident physicians with ADHD. And I'm citing a few articles later in the presentation, which were very helpful to me. I came across my first incident my first time a resident came to me and said, here's my diagnosis, here's what I need help for, where do we go for accommodations? At that time, the institution I worked for didn't have an accommodation that the resident knew what he needed. And so, but we didn't have an accommodation formally written up. But what we did do was we structured his schedule so that what he needed the accommodation for, which was testing, step 3, that his rotations around that, because he had such painful test anxiety, would give him the best opportunity to be successful. Resident physicians can require accommodation so that their academic performance and the clinical competency can be measured adequately. I think that is very important, especially when you have so much intenseness as our CCCs and we're measuring everything they do. They also fight stigmas and licensure reporting for controlled substances. A lot of people don't want to take a controlled substance that might help them get through their day easier, or they don't want to report it to the licensure board. Now, licensure boards typically, if you have one of these diagnoses, it takes a little longer for your license to be processed, but they will push it through. But a lot of times people don't want to divulge this. People look at it as a weakness. It is not. Stigmas hold many back from being transparent about their diagnosis and challenges, which can lead to more mental health challenges and faster burnout. We already struggle with burnout for our residents and our physicians, right? That's a big topic for us, and it's a truth. If you're neurodiverse, those things can happen faster, especially when you're not transparent about what you're dealing with in your world. As the normalization of prioritizing wellness and mental health gains momentum, discussing and normalizing mental health diagnosis have become increasingly prevalent in our daily conversations, which I, for one, am appreciative of, very appreciative that we can talk openly and honestly about these things. And then we can even guide people to where they might get the best assistance. So I want to talk a little bit about the stigma, the ADHD stigma. So STOP is an acronym: stereotyping, trivializing, offending, and patronizing. These are things we need to stop doing to people with neurodivergent diagnosis, not just ADHD. Imagine being unable to read a paragraph or follow a conversation without your mind wandering. I know it happens to neurotypical people as well. It happens to neurodivergence. You fight it constantly. I'm a huge reader. I have in the past years switched to Audible books. They make my life so happy. I love reading. And it's much easier for me to follow. Losing track of time is something you're known for among your family and friends, and you can't seem to meet deadlines despite your efforts. I have a sister that we're in our 50s now. I'll just put it out there. She's never been on time to anything. And I finally realized after much training and my own struggles that we needed to quit giving her a hard time about this. Like, is it who she is? Yes. Should we, should it be offensive to us, or should we give her as a family, blah, blah, blah is always going to be late. That's not fair. It's not right. Your tendency to see, I can't do it right now. Your tendency to speak without thinking sometimes bruises feelings. I've experienced this with multiple people. And then when you consider what's going on, especially having daughters with these diagnoses, I'm like, oh, it just came out. They didn't, that was not their intention. But then then neurodivergence also learn. We see it. We're very empathetic people, constantly interrupting people so that you don't forget what you want to say. That could be seen. So now imagine your friends and family telling you that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is not a real condition. Just let that sit with you for a minute. that you should just try harder. It's untrue. It is a real condition. Stigmas are based on misunderstanding and misinformation. Mental health is frequently subject to stigmas. Things like you're impolite, unreliable, emotionally dysfunctional, immature, or weak in character. These things are all things that people think or might think about someone, or even say it out loud, or say it to a coworker or a family member. It constantly comes back to that person, I promise you. On the other side of this, I want to talk about superpowers. So ADHD superpowers. There are many things that people with ADHD do extremely well. They're good problem solvers. Their mind doesn't stop. They see all the angles of the problem. Imaginative and creative. They're great. They have a great memory and they're observant. While we talk about the forgetfulness, there are text conversations, different things. I'm very visual things I've seen. I can repeat to you verbatim. There are things that neurodivergents see, even though they seem inattentive, but they can come back to you and tell you what someone was wearing, what their perfume smelled like, what the grass looked like that day. They tend to have a great sense of humor because we have to in some ways. Perseverance, strong moral compass. So this is something that I like to talk about. Tell you a little story real quick. So my youngest, who has ADHD and autism, we were in New Orleans and she was about 4 years old. It's a Sunday or Saturday morning and we are walking to have breakfast to get the beignets at the, and I can't, like I said, my mind just went blank. Everybody's gonna know the beignet place I'm talking about. We're walking through downtown New Orleans and there's a lot of homeless. And there was one lady with a puppy, and my daughter, Isabel, we went to have breakfast and she wanted to go back to that lady. She wanted to get her breakfast and take it back. And she wouldn't eat. She refused until we packed up her breakfast and we walked back several blocks, found this lady and gave her the breakfast. They have a lot of empathy, sense of justice. My daughter, same daughter, she didn't get any of the awards in school like kids get. You always get, most polite, nicest kid, whatever. And it broke her heart. Like she would always, the award ceremony would come around and she would be so sad. At the end of the year, she got the Justice Award because she was always fighting for someone else. They're very accepting of others, great multitaskers. We might procrastinate, but we can get a lot done. Compassionate and hyper-focused. So I just want people, there's more, but these are things that are very typical of people with neurodiverse and ADHD. So I want to talk about what accommodations may look like, or ADHD and residency, and what can we do? Sorry, I skipped ahead. So ADHD and residency. So what can we do as coordinators, as managers? We can be a safe place to land. We can ask questions like, what can I do to help you be successful? That's not judgmental. That's giving them, they're putting them in the driver's seat. They know what they need and you're giving them permission to tell you. Know your human resources and your GME guidelines and who to refer them to for accommodations. Introduce yourself to the disability office and learn what the policy and referral processes are. I know we can all go to a website and we can see what they tell us to do. Walk in there, introduce yourself, let them see you. After you learn the processes to request accommodations, add them or request that they're added to your overarching GME handbook and your program manual. So a lot of institutions I worked at where they were both separate. And if I would call the GME off and ask about something, well, it's in the GME manual. Well, let's just put it in our program handbook, or let's just make sure that we reference the page where that's at. That cuts down a lot of frustration of someone looking for something. So confidentiality. The right to confidentiality exists for residents regarding all aspects of the determination of disability status, as well as during the accommodation process. So we don't talk about this. For residents who choose to disclose a diagnosis of ADHD, the documentation of a diagnosis should be kept in a separate confidential record and not their general personnel file. Different institutions may have different policies, but this is traditional. In order to comply with existing guidelines, training programs should be proactive and have the procedure in place, as I said, require adequate documentation, ensure confidentiality, grant accommodations which measure core knowledge and not limits of the disability, and do not alter the core curriculum of the program. So this is important. Your program is tasked with delivering this education and they're to meet these guidelines. If accommodations change that core curriculum, that's where there are issues, and that's where it becomes more of a program director. We are program management, but that's where they have to figure out what they can do. Okay. Academic achievement in medical education is measured in part by performance on standardized tests. USMLE and COMLEX. This is how my first resident came to me with questions regressing accommodations. It was around his step 3. If your resident has shared their diagnosis with you, a reasonable question from a coordinator might be, how do you prefer to study prior to boards? And would you like me to work your rotation so that you'll have a lighter rotation to study prior to boards? In years past, I would tell you that doing master schedules, step 3 was, they were scheduling it. I wasn't worried about it, but it's become more, my later years of program management, it became more of, well, let's see when your step 3 is. Let's see what rotations you have. I mean, inpatient medicine is not a great rotation to have to do your step 3 on. And those tests are harder to schedule. Since COVID, those tests have become harder to schedule for the resident. Residency coordinators play a crucial role in supporting medical residents with ADHD. So if we educate and raise awareness for our programs and talk about it more openly and reduce the stigma, and then promote an inclusive environment. I think that's so important. When someone comes to us and they share their struggles with us, they share their challenges, maybe they share their diagnosis. I share mine. I'm not quiet about it. Then we promote more of an inclusive environment that fosters the culture of open communication where our residents feel more comfortable. So accommodations may look like extended exam time, which we're familiar with in the medical education. Like I said, requesting rotations around step 3 that are less rigorous, a study month. Some people may not receive the didactics well. So if we recorded those or they were in a more controlled environment, then they can go back and listen later. If we use assistive technology, speech to text software, organizational applications, this can aid in information processing and task management. And regular check-ins. I think it's so important. And we try to do this, but we get busy. And so hopefully you have a mentor program set up with faculty and you have residents assigned to faculty to help with that. But conducting regular check-ins with supervisors or mentors to discuss process, challenges, and potential adjustments or accommodation strategies. Before entering medical training, most residents and practicing physicians may have effectively managed their ADHD symptoms by leveraging their strong intellectual abilities. We all know they're smart. We all know they're greatly intelligent. And so they may have masked or accommodated, they had their own system, benefiting from understanding teachers and professors also who receive support and receiving support from significant others. Some structured environments and are very helpful. So we all, when we get into residency, it's not structured. I mean, it looks like it could be. We all know it's not. So to get successful, they need successful goal achievement despite the presence of their inattentive symptoms, and that can be increased due to residency and the constant changes, right? So many residents and doctors may have coped with ADHD symptoms by using their smarts, getting help from understanding teachers, as I said before, receiving support from loved ones. The good structure helps them very greatly. The structure goes away with residency. So I want to talk about, there's an article cited here, and it's actual accommodation suggestions for an anesthesia resident. This was a case study. This is one of the 2 articles I felt that were very specific on this. So this resident, following medical school, the resident did a 1-year internship followed by a 2-year research fellowship and subsequently matched into an anesthesiology resident, a top tier 1 and internationally recognized program. So the difficulties identified after she got into residency were excessive perfectionist tendencies that were thought by her supervisors to be his or her, I don't know if it's male or female, to be negative characteristic for being a good anesthesiologist. You'd think perfectionism would be a good characteristic, but it was viewed as it was a deficit for her. The difficulty were reported via written evaluations and verbal report to the program director. And despite the residents' efforts to minimize these issues, they were increasingly noticed by her superiors because of recurrent lateness, time management, and task management issues. So the accommodations suggested for this resident are here. So she went through a period of intense supervision, single staff position upon return from, she took a leave of absence, came back, had one-on-one supervision. Direct daily feedback by staff to the resident, specifically addressing time management, task prioritization, and areas of improvement. Daily case debriefing with a faculty member. Specification and discussion by the attending physician with the resident on high-level issues that are relevant to the case at hand. Review of the daily task list by a resident. Guidance by staff members. I'm not going to read all these to you, but this is an actual accommodation that was given for an anesthesiology resident. So talking about residents and a neurodivergence. So a national study of residents in emergency medicine programs noted that 1.3% of resident trainees have a documented disability. This is who have reported. And over 50% of program directors suspected that at least one of their residents may have a disability. Of the various disabilities that exist, learning disabilities were the most common, followed by depression, bipolar disorder, and musculoskeletal impairment. The majority of disabilities, 61%, were diagnosed before residency. Increased time allotment for exams was required by 15% of individuals, although 4 residents without a disability were also granted additional time. So those are just some of the national statistics. And we're talking about, these are the people that report. There's way more people that don't report than do. Okay, I am just, there we go. I was gonna say, I'm just overwhelmed with computer issues today. So I want to talk about some ADHD tips and tricks. There was that fast talking that you can do to help yourself, your staff, your residents. So find out what works for you and stick to it. Find out what, have your resident encourage them to find out what works with them and stick to it. It doesn't matter what someone says. And I say this because I was recently in the last few months in a meeting, and I like to take paper into a meeting. That's my process. I like to write it down, and then I'll take my notes and transfer it to what works best for me. Someone in the meeting said, "Oh, that's cute. You use paper." I said, "Yeah, I mean, that is what we, that's not that outdated." But that was almost offensive to me. I just took it wrong. So I was like, because everybody has their iPads or their computers and I'm writing on a tablet. Find what works to you and stick to it. There are apps like Todoist, the Notes app in my phone I use extensively. I text things to myself that I don't want to forget. Are you visual? Using a special place for keys, your wallet, your purse every day, and not to deviate from it. It took me years to figure that out for myself. And I'm very adamant about that for my children too. Don't deviate from your routine. I know sometimes we have to, life happens. But when you walk into your office, you might hang up your lab coat. Badge is always in your pocket. My badge is always in a little cubby in my car. I pick it up, come in every day. When I get back in my car, it goes in that cubby so I don't lose that. Important documents and meds, if you're visual, on the counter where you can see them and deal with them and you don't forget. For one of my children, her meds are on the counter. I walk in, I dump out, they're in a med pack. I dump that day out. She sees it, she takes them. If we clean up too much and I put that med pack up, we will forget literally 2 or 3 days. So those routines are very important for visual people, or not just routines, but seeing it out there. Using your Outlook, Google, institutional calendars for everything. I use it as my one-stop shop, right? I used to email all the clinic schedules, put them on calendar, call schedules, didactic schedules. There was one schedule for the whole residency. I use it for personal tasks. There's reminders for med taking, my laundry night, my workout times, all those things are on my calendars. And let me check time 1 second. I'm not saying, what time is it, girls? I can't see it on this computer and I didn't.
It is now 10:57, Kimberly.
Okay, I'm almost done. So if you could just hang with me for 1 minute. So, and I've kind of sped up because we kind of, lost some time. But in summary, I just want to say that this is so important that residency coordinators can support medical residents with multiple diagnoses, but ADHD by educating and raising awareness. and just being open, fostering an inclusive environment, ensuring clear communication channels, which is very important, guiding accommodation requests, collaborating with our program directors, conducting regular check-ins, emphasizing confidentiality, advocating for accommodation. There's no shame in asking for an accommodation. It will make your life and their life easier. There are a few steps. We already have a busy job, but I guarantee you it will take some stress off of that person and help them be more successful, and even yourself. Monitoring progress. I mean, even a text. Hey, how are you doing today? Hey, I know you took this test yesterday. How did you feel about it? Those kinds of things mean the world to someone. Encouraging self-advocacy. If someone comes to me with something, I appreciate it. And I'm like, what can I do to help you? Tell me, you know, what helps you be successful. Establishing feedback mechanisms for people. This proactive and supportive approach contributes to create an environment where residents with ADHD can thrive in their training and become successful doctors. That is the conclusion of my presentation. And I wanted to say at the end, and we'll share this, there are multiple references at the end, podcast, different things I've used. I'm going to stop my share now. And please, somebody, if anybody wants to speak up, say anything, please feel free. And I'm going to check the chat real quick.
I think the most important thing to say is what Valerie Brown just put in the chat. While doing all of this, take care of yourselves too.
So no, I'm the biggest advocate for wellness and residency coordinators, especially for the years that I did it. And I just felt like I never felt successful so many days I left because my to-do list was still so long and so many things didn't come off of it. I like how Christy agrees with the sense of justice almost to a fault. And I appreciate the backup on the notepads. Thank you so much. Cafe de Monde, thank you. Totally went blank. That's exactly where we were going. Oh, I'm going to read this article about late diagnosis trauma. Does anybody have anything to say that you just want to share with the group?
I was just going to say this, Patrice. I was just going to say, Keisha, for myself, with being overwhelmed, our jobs are just completely overwhelming. We have so many items on our to-do list that are urgent or are just super important that we know. So it's completely overwhelming. And then Keisha, I participate in fake shopping. I'll be up at night, things in the cart, it's in the cart, but I leave them there and pray that they go away so I don't order it. So I fake shop a lot, but I did get slacks for $1.99 from Macy's once, 4 pair each. So for my fake shopping, they went down while they were in the cart. So I did get those. But we have so much on our list. So just give yourself grace because our job looks like ADHD for us.
Yes.
And I can only imagine the residents, what they go through every day, patients dying, patients sick, they feel like they can't heal. It's just so much that goes on. So we have to give ourselves grace and participate in grace as well for those that we work with and our residents.
And
Thank you for that. I'll try leaving some of that stuff in the cart. I don't know if it'll work, but I'll definitely try. Thank you for that.
You know, in our recent, one of my recent CCC meetings, this kind of came up with one of our trainees, and it was like all the things that were happening. I'm like, ooh, that sounds like they're dealing with, a little bit of neurospiciness, but it's this like, you can't, it's this fine line of, hey, you probably have this. Can you go get that checked out? I mean, you really can't say that to a trainee. Yes. So it's like just providing them with the resources that we have and say, hey, have you thought of this? Or, and really approaching it delicately. So that's something that we have to, work with the trainees. It's different with us, and I think for yourself too, something that a lot of people don't, they're diagnosed, like I have severe anxiety in relation to. So that's actually more impactful than my actual ADHD. So, going on medication can sometimes be looked down upon. And I think that's also another stigma that folks who are neurospicy have to deal with is, yeah, I'm on Ritalin, or yeah, I'm on Adderall, yeah, I'm on Zoloft, or, people kind of look at you like, oh, your physician's probably just a drug pusher, or,
Yes.
how are you going to resolve all your issues if you're just constantly medicated? And I'm like, you don't understand. For somebody who, has a little extra salt in their soup, it's you need something to help you regulate. Otherwise, it's very, very hard to maintain just a normal day. And once I got on anti-anxiety meds, it's like everything else kind of calmed down. But yeah, but you can't tell your trainee, hey, you need to get on some drugs, because you're not going to pass this fellowship if you're not going to take care of yourself. So, it can be an interesting dichotomy.
Well, and that's one of the things I learned years ago. I was in another role. I was managing students and I was supervising someone, and our chair of the department felt like they had a diagnosis. And he's like, but I can't say that. They in a supervisor role, you can't say those things. You can't, especially a physician. And so I've seen that a lot in my career, where the doctor's like, oh, they have that, but they can't come to that person and say it. I'm going through the chat a little bit, and I just want to say, Rhonda, I read your comment about your 11-year-old daughter. So if you want to email me, or you ever want someone to talk to, I mean, I've gone through it with I have 5 kids. 2 of my kiddos have diagnosed out. It's hard, and it's especially hard where boys have more physical outlets and girls also have them. But if your self-esteem is low or whatever, you don't want to jump into that. And so it's a struggle. I saw someone else that said they wonder if any supervisory people are in here. I want to let you know we're all supervisory. You have residents under you, whether that's actually what your tree looks like or not. And you can take these insights and you can go back and share them. It's very important. So, but I do agree that the more people we have, the higher up, the better, the more diverse, the more normalized this will be.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that wonderful presentation. Aria had to leave. She had another meeting off campus that she had to go to. This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the APC Facebook page, as well as, I think, LinkedIn, maybe?
I think
I'm not sure.
on the Facebook page, and maybe LinkedIn. Yeah.
Probably later on today, if not in the morning when Aria gets back. There are a lot of questions in the comments between Aria, myself, and Kimberly. We will try to dissect through those questions and answer everything that we can. If there's something that we cannot answer, we will try to reach out to those who are more able to assist us in answering those questions. And please use the Facebook group if there's something that you really need, help with, or some type of research on. Use the Facebook group. It's over probably 1,000 people at this point on this group, and there's a wealth of information in the group. So we thank Kimberly for this great presentation. If there's nothing else, we will see you guys next month, and I will be bringing you a presentation on advocating for yourself, and I think maybe some type of public speaking. It'll be 2 separate presentations, but you'll hear a little bit from me next month. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you, guys. I can't wait to see you later. Bye.